Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Tyson Whitten. I'm Director of Mobile Security Product Marketing and Solutions at CA Technologies. I'm going to be joined today by Leif Bildoy, who's also at CA Technologies and plays a role in product management for CA Layer 7. Today's topic is 5 steps for end-to-end mobile app security for consumer apps. But before we get in directly into the topic, just a few different housekeeping items that I'd like to go through. We're going to have some questions at the end, so at the end of the presentation, please hang on, and we'll be sure to answer any of the questions that you may have. If you'd like to engage with us offline, you can see we have the layer7.com and security.com domains that you can send either through Twitter or Facebook. Or you can reach out to us directly. So myself, Tyson Whitten, as well as Leif. So when we get right into it, we're a little bit past the hour here. So the topic of today's conversation, we've gone through some of these topics in the past as it relates to end-to-end mobile security, but this particular topic today has a slight twist, and it's focused more on the consumer app use case or scenario, because they do pose a little bit of a different challenge as well as an opportunity for those in the markets today. So I think a good slide to start things off would be the opportunity. So what's the opportunity for organizations in the marketplace today as it relates to mobile apps? You can see the stat right here is that the mobile app market continues to explode. It's expected to reach $77 billion by 2017. So the question is, why is this the case? And a lot of the information and the evidence is really in the data itself. I mean, if you look at where users are spending their time when they're on their mobile phones, 82% of that time spent, of those minutes spent, would be with mobile apps versus browsers. Only 18% of that time spent is in the browser itself. And so, again, it's just the engagement and the usage is focused on the app. And you can also see that in the growth. I mean, on average, it's about 40 average apps per device, and that's just going to continue to grow. If you look at the number of mobile app downloads by 2017, we're looking up in the 268 billion range, and so that's significant. So businesses understand this. They understand that using an app is an engagement model, and essentially it's a strategic way for them to differentiate their business, extend their business to where the consumer is at all times. And it's really not just about advertising. It's about providing true value to customers through the mobile app. And so they're looking at different strategies in which, and yourself as well, joining the presentation, looking at different strategies in which you can leverage the app to drive growth, and improve engagement and then loyalty for your customer base. And so let's take a customer example, for instance. So we could put up a lot of different types of examples here in terms of different organizations that are using mobile applications in order to differentiate their business. So let's take Zillow, for instance. So this is a billion-dollar company, and really how they make money, and their largest revenue stream is what they call their kind of marketplace revenue stream. And so what this includes is a lot of local advertising from real estate agents and mortgage brokers and banks and brokerage firms, and that's essentially how they make most of their money. Now what's changed is that in 2013 they saw record usage of their product and their service, and so essentially 60% of all Zillow visits came from the mobile device. It came from the mobile app. And then the weekend traffic itself even topped 60%. That was at about 70% in terms of usage of application versus going to the website itself. And so you kind of dig into this a little bit more, I mean, into the actual details of how users are going about engaging with Zillow, that home shoppers spent more than 5 billion minutes across a large number of Zillow apps. It was 27 different apps, and then they viewed homes more than 2.5 billion times. And I think that was up about 150% from 2012. And so, really, what is this uptick from? What is this about? It's more than just the fact that there was a hot real estate market going on in the marketplace. It was a way that they could differentiate themselves through composite applications and delivering a more dynamic and engaging experience for their users. And so we can go through this real quickly. This is the build slide. I'll just kind of go through exactly, how they're providing this dynamic experience for their users. So essentially, if folks understand how to use usability, just if you bring it up, you type in an address, you get a very nice map. And so that's typically an interface with the device GPS, or it could be Bing Maps or what have you. And then it starts to connect to different information, right? It connects to property and county information. That's pulled from realquest.com. It can pull MLS information from diversesolutions.com. You can get transit scores from walkscore.com. So essentially all this is it's pulling different information and providing a more dynamic experience for users so that they can differentiate in the marketplace. As well as owner input. I didn't have that last build up there. So you can add, from a user perspective, owners can add their own information up into the Zillow app as well. And so at the end of the day, what they're doing here is just providing a very engaging experience to their customers and then differentiating in the marketplace. And then you can see that just in terms of the growth in the business. So let's look at another example here. So this is an example of Nike Fuel Band or Nike Plus. And so if folks are familiar with this, there's a huge uptick just in terms of wearable devices in the marketplace today, which essentially has an app on the wearable device. And so what this does is it tracks your movement, right? So from a health perspective, it will track your movement, daily activity, performance, and then the way that they use this is that you can compare information, share information with friends, right? Providing different types of insights, into kind of your daily activities or just kind of physical guidance in general. And so this was the first time that Nike moved away from their elite marketing model. And so they started to move away from, I would say, celebrities, right, or high-profile sports figures, like Tiger Woods and Lance Armstrong and some of the issues that they had there. And so they were looking at different ways that they could reach their marketplace and then provide true value, differentiated value. And so they took this approach from a wearable device perspective and linking that to a mobile app. And so this really spoke to the masses. It was something that they could build from the ground up. And so here, consumers really became brand advocates. So it wasn't just kind of wearing that, the eye-catching Fuel Band or just the way that they walk around with an iPhone all day. It was a way that they were able to share their activity through Nike Plus and collaborate on information across these different channels. And so the mobile app really was that mechanism that facilitated that. But here's the challenge, and here's one of the main reasons that we're having this conversation today, is around the security aspects of information that's being shared. And so when you think about the Fuel Band, and I think we're going to start to see a lot of this in 2014, when you start to think about what the Fuel Band is, in the market, the way they talk about that is the quantified self, right, and kind of understanding your daily activity and what have you. And so there's going to be a next phase of the quantified self. And so it's not just about measuring steps or your heart rate and sharing information with friends. It's about sharing this information, this physiological information and data with medical knowledge, right? So it's a transition of just, say, a few different data points, like the number of steps that you're taking, to actually trying to prevent or preventing diseases like diabetes, right? And so, but anytime you start to share this information, there's going to be security concerns, especially when you start to kind of get into the realm of healthcare information. And so, if you look at the diagram that I have there, pretty simple in terms of an individual using a Fuel Band, collecting information, syncing that with their mobile app, that then shared to the cloud through an API, and then that information then could be shared with different individuals, like a healthcare provider, for instance, right? And so, but as soon as that individual gets involved, that doctor or what have you gets involved with that type of information, the way that data is looked at, even from a regulatory perspective, can change. That can now become protected health information, or PHI, and which is covered through HIPAA regulations. And so now, that starts to kind of change the game somewhat in terms of how you need to look at your mobile apps and the information that's being shared, because the risk level starts to increase. And so I think what we're going to see over 2014, and so around apps as well as wearable devices in general, just to the fact that sharing sensitive information or healthcare information, you're going to start to see some patient concerns. There could be additions in government regulation and just workflow adjustments as it relates to data being shared and what have you. But this is really just one example. We could use a lot of different examples in here. This is around healthcare and PHI. It really can range in terms of personally identifiable information or financial information that could be shared just as easily based on the business that you're in and the type of engagement that you're trying to enable with your consumers. So security definitely is key. And so it kind of brings me to to what we're going to talk about today, right? So how do you achieve end-to-end security for consumer apps? And so given security is key for consumer app models today, we're going to walk through 5 steps on how to achieve end-to-end security for consumer apps. And so at a very high level, what we're going to cover is, 1, which apps? So what apps do you need to look at? Which apps should be considered part of your security model today, right? And how do you kind of go through that process in determining which ones you want to prioritize? Number 2 is it's good to understand the landscape as it relates to solutions. What solutions are in the marketplace that I should be evaluating and assessing that's appropriate for a consumer type of scenario, because not all solutions are built for consumers. Number 3, why is securing the back end? Why is that not just important, which it is, but opportunistic given where or when you're starting a new consumer mobile app project? And then number 4, when and how to protect the app itself. And so kind of given the app lifecycle and the business and security objectives that's involved, when do you want to start that type of security endeavor? And then finally, which is obviously very important as well, given the fact that the only reason why you're doing this is you need to drive revenue through that consumer channel, is that how do you maintain that convenience, which the mobile platform is built around, right? So you're trying to secure the channel itself, but how do you maintain that convenient experience, that user experience of that consumer? So it's really something that can't be traded off if organizations are going to be differentiating their business in the marketplace. So let's go to step 1. And so kind of step 1 is kind of a variation of the Fuel Band Nike Plus healthcare scenario that I just went through previously. And so this is a general picture in terms of how you should prioritize your apps and the information that's going to be shared and who's going to be accessing it. So step 1, if we start at the bottom there, step 1 would be, step 1 in the process would be identifying that risk level of the app. And so there's kind of multiple variables that go into understanding an acceptable level of risk. And the first at the bottom there is the who. So you're obviously creating this app for your consumers, and they're going to have different kind of usage models, but other things that you have to take into account, like I went through previously, is who you're going to share this information with. Who are you collaborating on in terms of sharing this information back and forth? I mean, I think the Nike example, resulted in data being covered by HIPAA once the healthcare provider access that information. So the who is very important in understanding the likelihood of a threat, right, to that information. And it also kind of changes, or could change, how information is looked at by the government, for instance, in terms of covered data entities. So additional regulations could start to be relevant here in terms of who's accessing that information. Right, so that could bump up your risk level based on that. Number 2 is, the where, right? And so the where is essentially the main point here. What we're talking about, it's the game changer, right? We used to access content, primarily through the browser, right? And even a lot of organizations are doing that today through the phone, through browser-based types of apps. But the experience and the usage requirements, maybe it's local data storage, are driving a lot of organizations to build those native apps. And so that provides, or that kind of introduces additional risk for the organization, right? That likelihood of a threat could increase for the fact that now that information is more mobile, right? You can lose the information. It's not only in a phone, it's in a wearable device. And so, as soon as that device could be lost, I mean, it can be accessed by different individuals. And so that's gonna increase the likelihood of an attack as well, or likelihood of of somebody accessing information that they shouldn't. And so finally, the what. And so, this is really the type of data. And that data can have an attributed dollar amount to it, right? So whether it's personal consumer information, health information, or financial data, there's more or less a dollar amount that could be associated with that information. And so really what we're looking at here is the combination of all these elements, right? It's the likelihood of a threat times that impact is going to increase your risk level. So it's important to understand all these elements that go into developing a mobile application and the type of information that's being collected to help you prioritize and really put the appropriate apps at the top of the list that you want to secure. Okay, let's start to move into what step 2 is going to be. And so to kind of lay the landscape here is to understand what solutions are out there in the marketplace, right? And so I think it's good to understand this even earlier in the process. I think a lot of you have heard of MDM or MAM, mobile device management technologies, mobile applications types of solutions, app wrapping, containerization types of solutions. And so these solutions are good and they provide a lot of value, but they have a place and they have time, and that's typically to the enterprise. A lot of these, and employees, a lot of these types of solutions have different requirements as they're deployed. They require additional access and control of the device itself, and that can tend to inhibit the acceptance from a user perspective. And so, as we kind of think about this, remember, we're in the business, this is a consumer webinar here, we're in the business of making money, and so as soon as privacy is impacted or security is too restrictive, you could start to risk adoption of your mobile app, and that's something that you need to make sure that you're taking into account. And so it's good to understand where MDM and MAM fits in. So if you look at the general requirements of an enterprise employee scenario versus the business scenario, which is focused on consumers, you can see that obviously there's a lot of overlap there in terms of security requirements, appropriate authentication, authorization to control access to the app, integration with social networks like LinkedIn or Salesforce, right, to provide a more convenient or simple registration experience for your users. It's probably more on the consumer side of the house, if I'd have to say, though. And then single sign-on as well, right, enabling that convenient experience across apps. Both employee and consumer scenarios have a lot of apps out there that they're developing organizationally, even across different business units or what have you. And so you want to make sure that you're providing a secure experience, but also enabling that convenient experience is critical as well. And then the last piece there as well is encryption. So just in terms of encrypting the information in motion or at rest. And so finally, there is a last feature here or item, and this, I think this is where the problem starts to occur, is that while kind of supporting BYOD policies may be acceptable for employee use cases, right? So they can opt into the device and or opt into policies which can control relevant policies on the device and then require access to different types of device components, such as the camera, the GPS, or the operating system itself, in which you would then have to wipe the device. Consumers would then view this as very intrusive and really not acceptable. And so, while MDM and MAM solutions kind of have very specific types of requirements in terms of supporting the enterprise, and they are very good solutions. So, don't get me wrong here. Full disclosure, CA offers an MDM and MAM solution, and they're very good at meeting the need of the enterprise and employees. But consumers potentially or do or will balk at this, right? And because it's all about privacy, and if there's privacy is inhibited and there's a risk of them losing control of their device, you could risk adoption of that mobile app and them downloading that app to from the App Store, right? So from iTunes or Google Play. So what does that leave us, right? So what types of solutions are in the marketplace? What are our solution options? And so, I think it's understood that most likely you're going to be working in a hybrid environment. You're going to have browser-based apps. You're going to have native apps. You're going to have different hybrid apps. And like I mentioned before, more often than not, your consumers are going to require that optimum experience. And just by looking at some of the previous examples that I went through, it's a very dynamic engaging experience that consumers are driving businesses towards. And so you can't leave that experience. So more often than not, as an organization, if the app is going to meet the consumer need, it's most likely going to be a native app that you're creating. And so what's the one thing in common with every native app that's being produced? Well, it's the fact that it's accessing an API. And so, when thinking about security, I think the fact that you're exposing information through an API provides an opportunity. It's not only an opportunity in which you can get information out in dynamic in a user-friendly way, but it's an opportunity in which you can now start to apply security at the same time, and that's at the API back end. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Leif. Leif's going to start to go through some of these additional steps and requirements, and you can start hitting here on step 3 in terms of securing the back end. Leif, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
So,
take it away.
Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone. I'm going to go a bit more in detail here on the aspects that you need to consider around API and when you're using APIs to power your applications. And so there's the whole range of issues. You need to think about, first of all, the threats that you inevitably will run into around your APIs. So you need to find a way, and where you're assessing your APIs, your assets, so that you can apply the correct measures around the APIs. So that would mean, for a consumer use case, typically, protecting private information. You don't want to fall down on that side. It's very hard to come up if you have a breach that is, your customer will be judging you on that. So there's a whole range of security threats that you need to look at. So injection attacks, replay attacks, and so on. And you need to figure out a way to set up that barrier around your APIs, but then you need to, at the same time, think about how is this application going to consume these APIs, because you can have a pretty big wall around your APIs and nobody gets access. That's not what you want to do. You want to expose these data and in a secure fashion and most likely in a centrally controlled way, so that your security architect can be assured that there's no wrongful access to these the data pieces. So you need to find a way to manage these APIs so that you can give the developer the access that he needs at the right time, and so on. And at the same time, you got to look at performance issues. So if you've been building out applications for your employees, usually that's a pretty bound, scenario. You know how many employees you have. You know their usage patterns quite well. So that's not that hard really to when it comes to scaling and so on. But when you're letting loose an application to your customers, you may have 1 million customers, 10 million, 100 million, or more. So now you need to really think about how is this infrastructure going to scale, and the particular things that you need to look at is when you're issuing tokens and things like that. What's your issuance rate, and also validation rates? Like, how often are these applications going to call back home, and what considerations you will have is time to live on your tokens and so on your access tokens and whatnot. So this will impact in the end how the user experience will be. So let me see here. So what you're going to think about here is really an end-to-end security solution. You need to figure out how we set up these barriers on the back end, and you need to figure out how is this application going to get through that, and how can we provision these applications in a secure way so that they can reach the APIs that it needs to call back to. So we saw the Silo use case where there's a whole mashup of APIs. You need to figure a way how to bring this all together. There might be different user accounts. You might need to do some federation around identities. You need to integrate into different cloud endpoints potentially, and so on. So in the end, you want this application to be able to consume these APIs and put the information, the right information, in the right place at the right time. So let's look at what does it imply when you're securing these APIs and securing your applications. What you would like to do is we mentioned identifying the assets and the risks around those assets. So from an API perspective, you want to know something about the context of the API request. So in the end, it boils down to knowing something about users, applications, and devices. So in general, it totally depends on the use case here. How much information can I use here? What's acceptable in terms of gathering information to make your access decisions on the back end? And there are different. This will be your choice of technology will also have an impact on what will be available. So if you're looking at the slide here, where we put in some attributes of these different entities. So the mix is always going to be different, and the point here is that the technology and use cases are determining to a large extent what is possible and acceptable to do. So around the user, he usually has a name, there's an email. And certainly a user ID, because you need to identify this entity one way or the other. And you're looking at the applications the same way. You have usually an app ID. There's a name, package name, and so on. Maybe you have an attribute around the footprint of this application, whether it's hardware accelerated or not. And you're looking over to the right side. There's a whole bunch of attributes around devices that you may or may not know, hardware version, software version, what kind of mix of applications do you have there, and again an identifier. So the point here, you need to identify each of these entities, but at a given point in time, you're not likely to have all of these attributes available. So in the case of a B2E use case, as Tyson mentioned, you're likely to be leveraging some MDM or MAM solution that can control applications and devices, and also provide a rich context with lots of attributes that you can use for your policies. So this is quite accepted in the B2E use case. Employees are relatively okay with having an entity running on the device, being managed, and so on. It's a relatively understood implication of around the compromise between the employee privacy and the enterprise's need for securing assets. So with that type of solutions, you will see a rich context. And the bottom part here around apps and devices, you will have lots of attributes being available through policy frameworks. So if you now move towards a B2C use case, well, there's a good chance that there is far less attributes available around the devices and the applications running on that. You can almost think about it as a Wild West. There's the devices out there, and yes, there are some big improvements in the device platforms. So from Apple and Samsung and so on, and BlackBerry, etc. There's over time, these platforms have become a lot more secure. But from an enterprise exposing APIs and building out consumer apps, this is still a different ballgame than the controlled B2E use case. So if you have the assumption here that there is no MDM and MAM, because it's just not feasible to deploy that in a B2C use case, and nor is it something that consumers will want to do. You're likely, though, to know a little bit more about the user. So it turns out that the convenience of social login trumps privacy for many users. So they're quite happy to depart with more data through various social networks in order for the convenience. So not having to manage and think about and remember your passwords and so on. That is a sort of big win of leveraging social login type of features. So as a B2C or as a enterprise deploying consumer-facing applications, the benefit here is you can query more into the social graphs, so you get more data about the user attributes, becomes a lot richer. You can get some data about applications and devices as well, but it is a lot more limited. And the nice thing about social leveraging social platforms is, of course, that they're extremely rich on data about user and all their activities. So you can use them as platform features to build more engaging apps. That's one of the aspects to keep in mind, apart from the security aspects. So let me move on here. So we established that we need to know something about these entities, the users, the apps, and the devices. And now it turns out that there are some pretty decent technologies out there in the marketplace that will help you with some of that. So you have OAuth, which you can use around provisioning access tokens and so on to track applications. You have OpenID Connect that you typically use to authenticate a user, so you exchange a username password for a JWT and so on. And you can use PKI technologies, so signed certs, to track devices. And these technologies map quite nicely to your task, to identify and authenticate these different entities. So together, they're solving many of the challenges that enterprises face when securing mobile applications. The problem, though, they're usually used in a web context. So what you need to think about is how can you ensure that these protocols are used correctly and in a meaningful sequence with your mobile application project. So the recommendation that we would say is basically you need to build this into your application, and by using these, you're essentially extending out from the API, securing the API on the back end, and now you're starting to think about how can I get this connection between that API and the back end secure down into the device, into the application. So the features that you should look for around your applications is things like two-factor authentication or single sign-on, social login, and so on. Now the downside of this is, of course, that it takes quite a bit of work to do this. I mean, there are these are standards. We mentioned these are standards and so on, and there are different libraries and stuff like that you can do. But as an application developer, you probably wouldn't like to track those security standards too much, because after all, your primary job here is to develop an engaging user experience and so on. So, but you definitely should consider things like two-factor authentication, like when you're accessing sensitive assets. So that would usually satisfy a strong auth requirement. And using social login, you would simplify the onboarding process and also provide more extended user attributes if you are looking to proofing the identity of the user. So keep in mind that if you offer a consumer some sort of username password registration flow, you are very unlikely to get many attributes typed in by a user. So in that sense, a social platform login is a very nice thing to augment the data you have about the user. Single sign-on, well, as the same with social login, it reduces the password typing, and this reduces the number of password with low entropy or essentially made too short and so on to carry any security. So the good news, of course, is that there are a number of vendors providing tools and SDKs for this. So you won't be alone when you're out there building these things. So if you take something like PKI and signed certs, if you're able to provision a signed cert to the device, you will be able to set up mutual SSL. And with mutual authentication, we're referring to two parties authenticating each other. So by verifying the cert that's been provided to the device, and in that case, both parties can be assured of the other's identity. This is quite important when you're talking about, whether it's healthcare data, prescription data, financial data, and so on. So if you combine this with the other two technologies we've mentioned, OAuth and OpenID Connect, you now established an end-to-end secure channel between the application and the server on the other side. So the step 5 here, I mean, it's all nice to build all the security measures in here, but you're potentially in a risk here of alienating your users and your consumers here, because in the end, almost any application project will fail if you don't build in the right user experience. So we looked at the Silo case earlier, where they have a mashup of different APIs and building that all together in a composite that makes a lot of sense for the consumer, providing the right information at the right time. But if you look at things like single sign-on, that is now a feature that will help the help the consumer with using his applications. He can, sign in the first time through application A or something, switch over to C. You don't have to sign in again, and that would be a big step in the user experience versus having to sign in each individual time. And on the right side, on the slide here, you can see, how a social login could be surfaced through an SDK built into an application. So there is the log-on dialog, which provide you with either username, password, or the user can choose to take one of those common social networks as a authenticator. And again, that would remove the need for extended use of passwords and so on. So I'm going to switch over here to one of the things that we do here at the CA Layer 7. So we have built out a gateway solution and a mobile access gateway that is doing many of the things we laid out here today. And we are also looking at some of these other challenges around, adaptation, optimization, and integration. The Silo case was one where you would see, the need for integrating in different cloud services and so on, and that is a very common use case. We're focusing in a bit on the security aspect, and so with the mobile access gateway, we have an SDK which is basically a convenience method for consuming APIs. So if you look at the diagram on the right side here, you have these different devices, whether it's a car or mobile phone, pad, tablet of some sort, could be anything with internet connectivity. Conceptually, you're using an SDK that you build into these applications that can then communicate home to the mobile access gateway. And the whole idea here is that you're simplifying this communication channel. You're bootstrapping these applications with various security artifacts, and this is something that you ought to consider if you're developing applications that are calling back home, consuming APIs, and you're building out anything on iOS, Android, or Adobe PhoneGap. So what's important here is, with all these standards that I mentioned, that you can actually get an easy-to-use device API that will help you tie in your application into this end-to-end security framework, where you can be assured that there is a minimal chance for being exposed to these various threats. And the whole idea with this, that you're building out with a security solution with a native SDK, well, you have other options, which you can usually use a browser to authenticate and so on. But if you're building this with an SDK, you get the option of plugging into these native features, security features that the guys like Apple and iOS with iOS, and also Samsung, Google, and BlackBerry, and so on, what they're building out on their handheld devices. And that's quite important, because it not only improves the security of your application, but it also improves the user experience. So having mentioned the mobile access gateway, well, CA also provides a whole suite of different tools and products that help you with application management and securing your applications, whether it's for mobile consumption or other. Basically, what we're looking to do here is to accelerate the application development and the delivery of applications. And it's all about the end-to-end mobile security aspects. And if you don't balance your security requirements with the requirements for user convenience, well, you need to rethink. It's really down to your use case to find out that's right mix. But we are here to provide the right tooling so that you can be successful with deploying your mobile applications for consumers. So I think this is
Great, Leif.
the end.
Well, let's, I think we have about 10 or 12 minutes here. There's a bunch of questions. So Leif, why don't I start to go through? I think there's a few I can feed over to you. Does that sound good? Get things rolling here? Okay. Let's see. So the first question that I wanted to hit on was more around the kind of mobile app kind of security realm of things. And so if a user has multiple business apps on the iPhone, does a single sign-on use native app protocols?
So if the native app, I'm not sure if I understand completely that question. So with the mobile access gateway and SDK, what we're leveraging there is and the boundary for the single sign-on is for applications that are signed by the same enterprise key, and because we're basically using keychain objects to manage the various token artifacts. Not sure if that question.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I think you hit it. I think it was more around support of single sign-on and the type of apps that are supported. Yeah, there's another question here that kind of gets into hybrid apps. I mean, I can hit on this, and then you can answer. So does Layer 7 work with hybrid apps that are both web and native? And so I'd say yes, we do, and especially with some of the recent or newer support that we're going to be releasing out to the marketplace as it relates to the SDK and support for PhoneGap. So if folks are familiar with that in terms of being able to support applications or hybrid apps across different mobile frameworks, there's a plugin through the SDK within that platform. Is one way I think to answer that. I think the other is that just with browser-based apps as well as native apps, and I'd say that there's a combination of solutions here that make a lot of sense in the way that they work together. If you look at some of the traditional web access management technologies like SiteMinder, and you combine that with a mobile access gateway like Layer 7, I think what we're doing is providing a unique solution to the marketplace in terms of controlling access across both browser-based apps as well as native apps. And we're also going to have some additional support as it relates to access and single sign-on between both of those use cases in the near future as well. Leif, do you want to expand on that a little bit in terms of that question? So support for hybrid apps, web and native.
I think you hit it there. So in the upcoming release of the MAG 2.1, we will extend the support, so not only Android and iOS, but also to PhoneGap applications on those platforms. So we're gonna use the plugin interface in the native plugin interface in the PhoneGap platform to be able to bridge into these native components. So what does that mean then? Well, it means that if you're writing your application in HTML5 and JavaScript, we will provide an API that will then, so in a JavaScript API that will be pretty much mapped in its entirety to what is possible then to do for native apps. And the nice thing with that is that if you have a mix of applications, let's say you have some phone gap applications and you have some other iOS applications, you will be able to bridge and have a single sign-on session between all of those applications. So you set it up, let's say you fire up your native app, and then you switch, as a user, you switch over to the hybrid app. It's seamless SSO and so on. And the dialog pop-ups, whenever you're asked for your credentials, will be managed by the SDK.
So I have a few, so thanks for that, Leif. We have a few device questions as well. So let me, an MDM question. You might be able to answer some of these. Let me start with one. So first one, so does an MDM device like AirWatch support security protocols like SAML, with a registered mobile device? And we have a few other follow-ons to that.
So I'm probably not the right one to answer that. I would imagine maybe even asking AirWatch about that, but my hunch is yes. I think they usually support SAML. In fact, we could use, in the upcoming release, we would be able to also use SAML instead of OpenID Connect for the user token. We could use a SAML token. It's a choice when you deploy the gateway, the MAG, and that's actually one of the extensions in 2.1. And usually we prefer the JWT. It's a bit more lightweight and so on. And again, it's up to the customer deploying the gateway if you want to persist the SAML token or map it to because the gateway is very good at mapping different token form factors and so on.
Mm-hmm. So let's just go through a few of the device-related questions since there are a few. And so does the mobile SDK help in securing the device physically? So in the case of my device being lost, how would the SDK help in protecting? And so
so
a layup for you.
Yeah. So what the mobile SDK does is that it's a client library that gets built into these applications, and it helps you manage these different token artifacts. And with that, there's also a possibility either for the user to log in a self-service portal, or for the system admin to log in and basically manage these different token artifacts. And so basically you could log in from any web console as a user and revoke the tokens that you have been issued. So if you have multiple devices, you will see multiple device registrations, and you can go in and revoke them. That means that if somebody was picking up your device and breaking into it and being able to access your application and trying to connect up, the application would fail in that request. Now, bear in mind, if you're going to steal the token, the tokens are securely stored on the device. So that means that you need to mount an attack on that particular device platform. And as you mentioned, that is something that is kind of outside the scope of us here, and we're relying then on the security features that are provided in these platforms.
Excellent. We have a phone gap question that came up just in terms of that plugin that we went through. When will that be available?
End of the quarter, so March 31st. Very
good. Yeah, that's actually a big part of the launch that we have next week at Mobile World Congress as well as RSA. So there's a large supporting feature in what we're releasing to the market or announcing to the market next week. So we have another one here. It's more a question around the MAG just in terms of support. So in terms of if they have a RESTful interface and that's used by the device to connect with the back end, wouldn't a standard gateway suffice? Why would you need the MAG? So I think this is an opportunity, let me go through some of the differences, just in terms of an API gateway versus the MAG, and maybe the additions of the SDK and what that offers.
Yeah. So the MAG offers a bunch of features. So you can think about it as a superset of the SOA gateway. So if you're familiar with the SOA gateway, you get all of that, all those features you do get in the MAG. Plus, you get WebSocket support, XMPP, OpenID Connect, and this mobile SSO protocol. So keep in mind, the SDK is a convenience tooling for developers. So in fact, you don't need to use it. All of the endpoints that around OAuth, OpenID Connect, and mobile single sign-on, the registration of device, and so on, all of those endpoints can be called from outside, from a browser, from anywhere, even from another server and so on. So you don't need to use the SDK, but it's a convenience that we sort of invested in to help application developers, because actually one of the things that we noticed from earlier customers that were deploying the SOA gateway and tried to build mobile applications was getting help, make it simpler to consume these tokens and so on. So that's the background for that, and we believe there's quite some value add there, and turns out that customers believe the same.
We have one last question here, Leif. So this is around client cert management. So this person, they love the mutual SSL part of the security architecture, but if they had millions of users, how would they manage client certs? Have any guidance there, suggestions?
Well, the cert is issued by the gateway. So the gateway acts as a CA, and you get a CSR coming in from as part of the bootstrap process in the client library. First time the library is invoked, and we're assuming it's the first time one of your apps are being called, it would realize that the various token artifacts are not available at the device. So it starts with a registration flow, and that's when a private key, the key pair is generated on the device, and the CSR with the device ID is sent up to the MAG. The MAG is authenticating the user against an IDM or something like SiteMinder, and upon being authenticated, the signed cert is generated and then pushed back to the device, where it's managed by the client libraries, and in case when you have an API that is exposed that requires mutual auth, it will be coming up to the gateway with the API requests and so on. That is generally the flow around that.
All right, excellent. So I think we're over our time now. Thanks everybody for the questions, and thanks for joining. Hopefully the folks on the line found this topic interesting and informative. So I'd like to thank Leif for joining me today during today's presentation. We look forward to meeting with everybody again for the next presentation. Have a great day.
Thank you.